Everybody, and welcome to Virtual TrekCon with Sirach Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we are joined by visual effects and concept artist Daren DOCHTERMAN. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Awesome. I think all three of us are in LA, so we're enjoying the same beautiful weather right now.
It's lovely out here. You can't ask for anything better.
Yeah.
So first things first, you were a visual effects supervisor, huh? On the motion picture. That's the very first Star Trek, the director's edition, right?
The director's edition, which we did back in the year 2000. We made it in 2000. It was released in 2001.
Wow.
But I was extremely lucky to have gotten to work directly with Robert Wise, the director. And it was an amazing project, because this was 20 years after the film was released, and my partners and I, Dave Fine and Mike Matessino, we got this project going, and Robert Wise wanted to go back and get those basically 2 months of post-production that he missed having on the original release, because as most everybody knows who's studied this, when Star Trek the Motion Picture was released on December 7th, 1979, that was their drop-dead date. They had to deliver a movie by that date, or the theater owners would sue Paramount.
Why, there were delays?
Well, here's what happened. They made this date back while they were shooting in 1978, and unfortunately, they had a bunch of problems with production and with getting a script done on time, and they were rewriting the script daily, almost hourly, while they were shooting the film. They also had a problem with the first visual effects company that was hired to do the effects on it. And after a year of research and development, they had 0 shots done. And they were left with about 7 months before release of the film. And so it was a whole big deal. They brought in Douglas Trumbull and John Dykstra to basically do all of the visual effects within 7 months. And it was a crazy, horrible experience for Robert Wise and the whole crew, because it was going down to the wire, and they had to release the film on that date. They couldn't push it. They couldn't do anything to change it. So what happened was, it wound up being released as basically a rough cut. In Robert Wise's mind, that movie that was released in 1979 was a rough cut of the film, and he never got a chance to preview it for audiences. He never got a chance to basically trim any of the visual effects that came in, because as the shots would come in, they would cut them right into the film, and they had, because it was already mixed, so they couldn't adjust the length of anything. So I believe the term for that is cluster F. And Robert Wise was very upset about the situation that he was put in. He didn't talk about the movie at all for about 18 years afterwards, because he was, very, very upset that he was forced to release what he thought of as a rough cut. And when we approached him 18 years after that, and we took him to the Directors Guild Theater, and we showed him the movie again, the first time he'd seen it since the premiere on December 6th, 1979. And so we asked him, take a look at the film and think about, if you had that extra 2 months of post-production, what you would do. And so we sat down with him, we watched it with him, and then after the lights came up, he said, I think we can do something with this. So it was great, and we wound up doing a fine cut of the film based on all of his notes and all of his wants to sort of, compact the film in some ways, and sort of, make the beats a little better for the characters. and include the famous Spock crying scene that was cut for mere time, that some people have seen in the television cut. They included those scenes. And of course, Leonard Nimoy was very upset that those were cut from the theatrical version, and rightly so, because they are amazing moment in Spock's character, and it is the story of the film. I mean, the film is the story of Spock's change from cold, unfeeling Vulcan at the beginning to basically making his human and Vulcan side live together in peace. And, so it was things like these that Robert Wise wanted to include in this final cut of the film, and also go back and reassess some of the visual effects shots that he wasn't completely happy with, and add some others that they had intended but never got a chance to finish. And so we wound up doing basically around 90 to 100 new visual effects shots for the film, for that DVD release then. And I was the visual effects supervisor on that, and helped make that happen. So,
it kind of reminds me of George Lucas going back and changing Star Wars, but I think for very different reasons. It seems
Absolutely.
like I think when your situation, you weren't going like, I really just want to add. I always pictured some monsters and some Jawas in the background here.
Yeah, no, it absolutely very different reasons for doing that. But to be fair, the special editions of the Star Wars movies are what helped sell this idea to the studio, because those, of course, did very well. And so we, got the studio to think, well, if we invest in this, we can basically have a new product to offer. And so they did. And unfortunately, at the time, they limited it to only DVD. So all the work had to be done in 720, or no, less than that, 480p. And it was limited to that. We had planned on doing a high def version of it at the time, but they wouldn't give us the funding to do it. So, in the 20 years since then, we've been constantly, trying to remind the studio that, hey, we can upgrade this. We can, make it future proof so that you can have this movie to release. And we've gotten very close to getting them to say yes again. We still don't have it. We still don't have a green light, but we are in constant talks with the studio and trying to figure out how to do this so that we can have a final, 4K or better release of the film for the director's edition.
Now, are you talking about like going in and like tweaking a little bit more, or just only the quality?
Well, only having to redo the effects based on our original assets, to redo them to high resolution, and no changes in the cut, because that was Robert Wise's preferred cut. So unfortunately he passed a few years ago, and so we honor that. We honor his basically last wishes for the film. So.
Is that a theatrical release you're looking for, or just a?
It's anybody's guess. That making it at the proper resolution would open up so many wonderful opportunities for it. So I think any of those things would be a great idea. I mean, I think no one really knows what theatrical release is going to be in the future right now. For anything. So.
Right.
I think that the opportunity is there, and it certainly can happen to expand the reach of this movie, which is it's 40 years old now, and it's a classic.
Was Robert Wise satisfied after you guys went and redid was he satisfied with his cut?
He was very satisfied. He had we had a premiere at the Paramount Theater on the lot, and his smile was so big, it's as if this huge weight had been lifted over the past 20 years, that he could finally feel good about this, and it was really sweet to see. And he made a lovely speech at the beginning of it, of the premiere, and he was so relieved that this this was basically the last big movie that he had worked on, right? So it was this always unfinished. It was always this unfinished thing that he hadn't been able to go back to. But with this, he was able to sort of close the book on it, and that was a very wonderful thing to see.
That's a big moment in Star Trek history too. I mean, redoing and finalizing the first Star Trek movie 20 years later is a really big moment in the history of the franchise.
It's a very big moment, and matched only by the release of the film itself originally, because prior to this, no television show had made the transition to films using the same cast and basically in a motion picture format. There was the 1966 Batman show made a version to a long episode to be shown in theaters that was called the Batman movie in 1966. But it was exactly like the TV show because it was made by the same crew, made by the same actors at the same time. But motion picture was released 10 years later. After the show had been canceled. So it was a big change, and it sort of opened up a whole floodgate of opportunities for television shows to be made into movies and vice versa.
Now I really want to get in. There's television, there's movies, and there's radio, and I definitely want to hit that up. But before we do, because you are to me, that's like a pioneer of what we're doing right now. You were actually talking Star Trek on the radio. But before we get to that, you're also a concept artist. Looks like you've worked on Star Trek Beyond, which I didn't know. You've also done concept art on Star Trek Picard, which is also awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do or what you did on Beyond and what you do for Picard?
And I also worked on the pilot of Star Trek Voyager.
I saw that. Caretaker.
Back in '94. Yeah.
Tell us about that too.
That was fun. I mean, because I had been working. The first movie I worked on was The Abyss in 1988, and I turned 21 on that.
Yeah, set. I remember that movie too. The Abyss.
It was a good one, right?
It's a wonderful movie. I love it. It was the first thing I worked on, and it was the hardest thing I've ever seen done. So every production after that was sort of, like a piece of cake, because we didn't have to worry about the actors drowning or things like that. So it was little things like that sort of, spoke to me. So I had been working for a few years already, working on movies mostly. And I had been a fan of Next Generation since '87. And of course the original series since I was little. But I certainly was aware of all the sort of production happenings and people making Next Generation. And I had wanted to work on it for years, and I just sort of couldn't, get in on it. It was sort of a closed system from the beginning. So certainly for something that I did, because they already had, Andy Probert was working there, Rick Sternbach, and several other people that I'd heard of before. But actually, as a result of working on the Talk Trek show, which we'll talk about after, I was able to learn of an opening in the Voyager art department where they needed someone to help fill in while Rick Sternbach was working furiously on the design for Voyager. There was no one else around to do the other designs that were necessary for the pilot. So I went in there and I interviewed with Richard James, the production designer, and had a great meeting. And they said, "Sure, come on in." So it was a lot of fun, And my first time working on a Star Trek project that I had been a fan of for so long. And I was up there in the art department, up those stairs in the long building above stage 8 and 9. And I was actually in the office where in the movie Sunset Boulevard, the young writer, the woman, works. her office, that was my office on Voyager. Okay. So it's a little funny thing from old Hollywood to the new Hollywood back in '94. So that was a lot of fun. I worked on a whole bunch of films after that. And then when the opportunity to work on Star Trek Beyond happened, it was sort of a connection from The Abyss, because Andy Siegel, the prop master on it, worked on The Abyss. And he was, he was one of the prop guys there. So I was called in for that. I was glad to help. I basically was doing prop design for the film. A couple different variations on the phaser, and a couple different little devices that were needed. It was very strange because they were in the midst of rewriting the whole thing. This was after the first stalled attempt to do the film, and so then they trash canned that and did a whole new script with Simon Pegg and his writing partner doing it. And so they were still trying to figure out what was necessary. So it was in that time period that I was working on it, and new ideas would come in to the prop department, and they would say, well, we need something like this, and we need something like this, we need a backpack, we need all sorts of various things that just need to be designed because they don't exist.
Did they change it up on you?
They changed up a lot of stuff. The thing I designed was a rocket backpack that basically Kirk was going to ride around, and that became the motorbike scene.
Okay.
So there was a lot of changes going on. So not
the
a
Beastie
lot
Boys
of stuff.
motorcycle scene.
Yeah.
Exactly. So not a lot of stuff I worked on made it into the film, but it was still fun, and I got to share an office with the great John Eves, which is always fun.
Wow.
What's the creative process for you when you're making something out of thin air and basically that hasn't existed?
Sometimes it depends. Sometimes the prop master has an idea, a specific idea of what they want. Sometimes they have a found object that they want converted and changed somehow into something else. And sometimes they say, well, we need this thing and it needs to be about this big. Come up with something. So I'll come up with, 5 or 6 ideas, and I'll make illustrations of that and show it to them. And either the prop master or the prop master and the production designer and the director will look at it and say, yeah, well, we think we kind of like this part of this, but we like a little thing happening over here. And so it goes into revisions and combinations of things, and it's all a creative process that I enjoy in the long run. Sometimes they pick my first choice, sometimes they don't, but it's always interesting, and it's always sort of fun to sometimes come up with things out of thin air. But luckily, if things are going right, you have an idea where the mindset of the bosses are, so you can sort of think along their lines as you design stuff, and that's what I try to do.
Now, for those of the people at home that don't know exactly what an illustrator does, including myself, are you more of like a pen to paper guy or pencil to paper, or are you illustrating on a computer software?
Back in the old days, like on Voyager, it was all pencil and paper, and inks and markers and all sorts of various ways of making drawings. Sometimes even paintings. But these days everything is digital. And it has changed a little bit over the last few years, because it used to be that it was basically just drawings, right? I would hand in drawings of things, and then those would go off to whatever vendors were making the props or whatever it was, and then they would interpret those drawings. These days, I'm more building models in 3D,
right,
and getting them as close to finished as possible, so that they can take those files and actually 3D print them to start the process of making the props from that. So I've found that a lot of the stuff that I do now is directly from my files, and so they just grow it from my computer files, which is fascinating, and I love it because there's not a lot of room for interpretation when you hand them the model, which is great.
Yeah.
What kind of time frame do you have to develop stuff?
It depends. Sometimes I have an entire week to come up with something. Sometimes I have a matter of hours. It all depends. Certainly on Picard, there was a lot of stuff happening that was changing a lot. And so they had new ideas flying in, and the producers wanted, different things that had been planned for before. So a lot of those things had to be done really quickly, like in the matter of a day or two, or sometimes by the 4 o'clock meeting. So it's all it's all how it is, the excitement of production, and everyone is charging at full speed. And
right.
Sometimes there are signs that they put up in front of you, so you got to turn left when you thought you were turning right, and it's all sort of the process of trying to keep producing things while the machine is running, and to try not to get your hands caught in it. So it's a lot of fun, but it's also sometimes frustrating, and you pull your hair out, and it's crazy making, but. That's this is the business we've chosen. So
when it comes to designing things for Voyager, which was 90s Star Trek that we know and love,
sure.
And then designing things illustrating things for Star Trek Beyond, which was in the 3JJ movies, which is kind of its own entity, and then going over and illustrating things for Star Trek. This is like 3 different generations and almost like 3 different caretakers of Star Trek. Did you feel like they wanted the same similarities from 90s Star Trek to 2000 Star Trek to Picard Star Trek, or were they just kind of reinventing and rethinking everything?
I think it's a combination of all those things, because obviously there is a visual language that Star Trek has established over many years that that even found echoes of TOS in Next Generation and beyond, and so all those through lines of design had a connection to it. But usually my job, no matter what movie it is or what show it is to try and find out what that language is as quickly as possible and what their intention is. So the sooner I can come up with an understanding of what language they're using and what things appeal to them, and what things that when they ask for something, what do they actually mean? That is sort of the main difficult part of the job. Designing stuff is easy, relatively. It's figuring out what they mean when they ask you for something that is the difficult part. But that's all related to experience and knowing how to do stuff on the fly. But it's all related to being creative and being able to switch your mindset at the drop of a hat, which you need to do in many such jobs in the creative industries.
You've got your artistic universal translator.
Sure.
Oh, this guy, I know what this guy means. He means when he says the curvy thing, he means
yeah, exactly.
Got it.
When you go ahead.
No, please go ahead, Sarah.
No, I had a question about so when I'm using the prop, sometimes the things light up, or they do stuff. Is that something you come up with too, like the lighting of it or the functionality of the thing?
Sometimes, if it's something that is called for in the script, absolutely, I'll indicate that in an illustration or something for if it has a specific action that is requested in the script. Other times we'll come up with sort of interesting things that it could do if they wanted to. It all depends on how much money do they have to spend on it, how much time do we have to build it. It's all related to that. And of course, we love to put in like little Easter eggs. If there's, I remember on Picard we were designing the logo for the La Serena, basically the communicator, the little pin that he wears. And the first bunch of those, I was sneaking in a little Starfleet Delta that wasn't exactly the Starfleet Delta, but it sort of reminded you of that. So that there are certain representations of that are still in those designs. But it's all depends on how fast do they need it, and how quickly can we get this thing out and being built and on set.
It's really cool. I was thinking it's too bad you didn't work on Deep Space Nine. You could have designed a pen for Sirach, right?
That's true.
Sirach's favorite pen.
Yeah.
Well, I sure remember going to those sets because they were right across from my office.
Oh, that's right.
The promenade was right there, and I saw them every day, walking around. And when the door was closed, you knew that they were making magic in there. But in the meantime, I got to see all the people milling around in uniforms and costumes, and it was great fun. And that was all going on. Because when I started on Voyager, they had just, I believe they had just trashed the Next Generation sets. They had just gotten rid of them, and we built the Voyager on the bones of Next Generation.
Right. We currently are on our podcast, right where Voyager Caretaker begins. So there was I believe there was 13, 14, 15 episodes or something. It was a half a year of Deep Space Nine where Next Generation ended.
Yeah.
And Voyager hadn't started yet. There was that half season, and that was that season, that part where you're talking about where they're
That's exactly that time.
Building stuff.
I remember walking down to the, I believe it was on 9 where engineering was going to be. They had, basically cleared away, and they were starting to build on the skeleton of engineering from TNG. But the real thing is, it was the skeleton of engineering from the motion picture from 1978.
Wow.
Because all the metal structure underneath there, there was an elevator that went up, there was the central core, all of the structure for that still existed, and all of the Next Generation engineering was built over the structure of the motion picture sets. And on Voyager, we took all that stuff out, and you'll notice that the Voyager engineering is quite similar to the layout of the motion picture engineering, because they still had the central core and all that sort of stuff. So
I didn't know that. That's really cool.
It was fascinating, the sort of archaeology, that had occurred, from at that point. It was like 15 years earlier.
Is that the best way to do it, or? I mean, to recycle the sets?
The cheapest,
absolutely, absolutely. Whatever you can reuse that hasn't been thrown out or destroyed, absolutely, because there are no opportunities to spend more money. You are absolutely sort of restricted, and at best you meet your budget. At worst, they cut your budget, and you have to figure out ways to deal with that. But yeah, any opportunity to reuse or repurpose something, always is the case.
Let that be a lesson from Daren DOCHTERMAN the hippie. Recycle, reuse, restructure, everybody. Listen
darn right.
carefully. So I did want to change channels a little bit to something I didn't know about you till you told me, which is really, really interesting. You did some Trek radio in the 90s. A lot of people viewed the 90s to be kind of like Star Trek's heyday or golden years.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like the granddaddy of what we're doing now. Sirach and I have our podcast. You have yours, which we'll talk about a little later. But it was kind of like early days of podcasting, right? I don't know anything about this. Can you tell us what this was?
Back in, I think it was around 1991, maybe.
Wow.
There was this woman. Joyce Mason, who was this fan. She was the head of Bill Shatner's fan club, and she and her friend Evie thought that it might be fun to do a radio show about Star Trek. You know, where this came from, I have no idea, but they did it. They contacted a local radio station, KIEV, which is in Glendale, California.
Okay.
And it was on the AM band, 870 AM. And they had a time slot on, I believe it was Friday nights or Sunday nights, something like that, because we did both.
Back in the day when Trekkies had nothing to do on Friday nights.
Well, you know, the original series third season took place on Friday nights.
Right.
So I think it's a grand tradition to continue. But so she started this show, and I think it was at I think they had a convention. There was a convention, maybe a creation convention near the airport, and Joyce and Evie had this table at the con, and they had flyers, and so I picked one of them up, and wow, this is fascinating. Apparently they'd had one broadcast of the show already, and so I started listening on week 2, and it was fascinating. It was certainly unscripted. It was unplanned. It was very rough, very rough. But it was, it was fun. It was fans talking about Star Trek, and they would have callers call up and talk with them, right? So my friend and I, Dylan Del Gercio, who I went to school with at USC, he and I were huge Star Trek fans, and so we said, well, why don't we just call in to the show and try and talk to them on there? So we did. We said, hey, we love your show and all that sort of stuff. And I think at one point I called in as George Takei. I said, well, okay. Hi there. I'm certainly excited to hear your Talk Trek show, and I love listening to all the fans talking. And so it was totally awful, but it was just a fun thing to sort of get the energy going, and they thought it was fun. And apparently shortly after that, they had this idea to have fans come in and do a scripted roast of Kirk and Spock, which, who knows if that's a good idea? I mean, basically it's not a good idea, but
you said it, not me.
So
well, you can't script a roast either.
Yeah, exactly. But they had one of the fans was a writer, and so thought this would be a fun thing to do on live radio. And so they said, send in your audition tapes for, playing various roles. And so Dylan and I sent in, I believe I did Kirk, and he did Sarek, and so we sent in these tapes, and lo and behold, they contacted us. We'd love to have you come in and be on the roast. So we had a whole bunch of people go in and record this goofy roast, but it was a lot of fun. And
Daren, you're not going to get away without doing a Shatner impression. You set it up. I was like, is he not going to do a Kirk? All right, we're ready.
The question is, do you want young Kirk or old Kirk?
Oh, old Kirk. That's even more extreme, I think.
I don't think I want to do this. In fact, I'm not going to. I'm just going to ignore it, and we're going to move on. Okay?
Yeah, you got his personality.
That's it. That's it.
But it was a lot of fun, and we had so much fun, and that they called us back to just be guests on the show, just to sit and talk Trek with them, because the dynamic was good. And so from that moment on, it was probably the later half of 1991 that Dylan and I would go in every week and be on the show. And it was hilarious, because we would have we would have guests in the studio. Sometimes we would have callers in, and through Joyce's contacts, she brought in a bunch of actors, a bunch of we had Danger Madelone, the stuntman, come in, and we had who else? We had a couple of the composers from the show, and this was all this was all in the thick of Next Generation.
Right. Yeah.
And later we had Shatner on the show on the phone. We had Jimmy Doohan. We had Nana Visitor. We had who else did we have? Oh my God, we just had a bunch of
probably Neelix.
No, because that show hadn't come on yet.
They were 95, starting in 95.
Yeah, but it was a lot of fun because it was basically a podcast, but on regular radio. After a couple years, the head of programming for that station moved over to what was called the Cable Radio Network, which was located up in Sunland. And what that was, it was the audio content of basically the channel listings on cable TV stations. So the sound behind when you click on the channel listing was the Cable Radio Network. And so they had regular programming that you could, click on and listen to. And the upshot of it was that it was in like 8 million homes being, distributed to that. So we had a huge increase in listenership. And this was borne out by the number of callers that we were getting every week, because we were getting callers from, getting 20 callers every week from all over the country. So it was really an interesting sort of experiment in this basically grassroots fandom radio show.
For sure.
And it was amazingly fun, and I remember it well. One week, they had the whole crew making the documentary Trekkies.
Yeah.
And who was there? Denise Crosby was there, and we had her as a guest. And you can see us in that documentary. There's a little section on Talk Trek, and I'm there. I made sure that I didn't say anything because I didn't want to be interviewed. I didn't want to. I didn't want to be sort of connected with it, because by this time I was working on the show. I was working on Voyager, so I wanted to sort of maintain my status in both worlds.
Sure.
But you can see me.
I recuse myself.
Exactly. But it was a lot of fun, and it was an interesting time in my life, and I'm still doing it now on the Inglorious Treksperts podcast. We're still talking Star Trek here, years and years and years later, which is still fun.
I swear, I wish I'd known that there was like Star Trek talk on the radio back then. I would have loved it as a kid, just like listen to people talk about Star Trek, and let me just like zone out and just listen to them talk about, Captain Picard and all that.
Yes.
So now, you're doing Inglorious Treksperts for almost 2 years.
Yeah.
With your partner, Mark A. Altman.
Mark A. Altman, whom
How did that come about?
I met through Talk Trek, because he was, he was a journalist. He was a journalist. He wrote for Cinefantastique and had his own magazine, Sci-Fi Universe, and we had him as a guest. And so that's where I met him, and that's where we started our friendship, back in the 90s. And so it came about, 2 years ago, 2018, when Mark basically said, "Hey, listen, do you have any interest in doing a podcast?" I said, "A podcast about what?" He says, "I don't know. Talk about sci-fi stuff, or, movies, or, the stuff that we like, just the stuff that we normally talk about if we're, out at dinner, things like that." And I said, "That sounds like a great idea. I'm not sure it can be confined to one podcast, however." So we did one sort of trial run, and we did 2 episodes then in the space of a day, and we had rented out this recording studio to do it, correctly with good quality and everything. And so we had it, and it basically, it sort of had a format, but it really didn't. We were thinking of various titles for it, and sort of one of them was Geeks of a Certain Age, sort of trying to sort of
wow, that's like was that directly a reference to Scott Bakula's show, Men of a Certain Age?
It was certainly related to that, because
oh, that's cool.
Because Mark and I are both the same age, and we interestingly have sort of the same experiences in early fandom. Both being raised in New York, and watching Star Trek on WPIX in Channel 11 in New York every night, of the week, and so we had that sort of related experience. So we sort of took that original show and we split it off into two. Half of it became what we called the 4:30 movie, which is also from our childhood. On the ABC affiliate in New York, they had a show called the 4:30 movie after school that would show, a lot of times genre films, and they would have a week of Planet of the Apes films, or the week of monster films, or a week of cowboy movies, something like that. Every week was a theme week. And so we decided to do something like that for our 4:30 movie podcast. And so we would take a subject, and four of us, Mark, myself, Steve Melching, and Ashley Miller, would pick a movie to show on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then we would all sort of talk about what we would do on Friday. And so that sort of established that framework for that podcast, and that was a lot of fun. And then the other half of it was just talking about Star Trek. And Mark came up with the title Inglorious Treksperts, of course, basing off that the Tarantino movie, Inglorious Bastards. And so it was something that we decided that we would talk about Star Trek from a positive point of view. Because there's, the internet is filled with negative people saying, oh my God, this is terrible, and what are you doing watching that, you idiot? We weren't going to have any of that vocalized on the show. We just wanted to support and tell about the stuff that we loved. Mm-hmm. And so it was intended to be a positive outpouring of fanish love for these things. And I think we've mainly stuck to that, but we, it's not easy sometimes, but it's really nice to have, positive reinforcement, as I said before, from fans of the podcast and fans of Star Trek, saying that they enjoy this, I don't know if it's unique, this take on talking about Star Trek. And there's a lot of like minds out there that enjoy this kind of thing. So I'm very grateful for that.
Right. There's a lot of negativity out there, and that seems like that's where the money is. People that hate watch or do the negative stuff, they get all the numbers because people are just so angry and frothing at the mouth lately.
Because at this point, there's certainly no money in being positive.
We're more into just like celebrating the thing that we like. Let's all just talk about the stuff that we like, and when Sirach and I criticize an aspect of, say, like Deep Space Nine or a line or something that wasn't great, it comes from a place of love. Like we're not doing it to try to shoot it down. It's kind of cute that they did a bad line here. That we're like, oh, there goes our Bashir again being a slime ball. It's okay.
Yeah, exactly. No, we had an experience with that. We did a whole episode talking about Star Trek 3, and though we love Star Trek 3, and we enjoyed watching it when it first came out, it has a lot of problems. And so we basically listed all those problems. And
first of all, it's an odd number.
Yeah,
that's its first problem.
I don't go along with that. I don't go along with that. Obviously, because of Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
Yeah.
But we sort of went down the list of why Star Trek 3 is bad for Star Trek. And, but it was all given from a position of, we love it, we just wish it were better. That's all. Yeah. And so that's a little bit dancing on that high wire. But, it's fascinating to have had, people who've worked on these projects come in and talk on the show. And they say, yeah, we kind of feel the same way, but it's all good now. We're all one big happy fleet, and everything's fine now. Thank you. How are you? But yeah, so it's again, I wouldn't do it if it weren't a hell of a lot of fun. And honestly, these days, being stuck out of our studio that Dean Devlin's production company has provided us with. We can't go into the studio because of the whole pandemic. So we've been doing these Zoom episodes as well. And we're getting to bring in a lot more guests that we wouldn't have been able to have in the studio for real. Because originally, certainly the first year, the rule was if you can't come into the studio, you can't be on the show. Because we wanted the quality, we wanted the interaction between, people. And we didn't want to have to deal with the crosstalk of electronics, to sort of have a real sit down with someone. And while we still prefer that, it's still great to be able to talk to so many people that for one reason or another couldn't come to the studio, whether, they're far away or they don't want to come into Los Angeles for some reason. Sure. But it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun, and I hope it continues a long time.
We're just about out of time here, but just real quick, that's kind of the problem we ran into, Sirach and I, was with Soleil Moonfry, was that she only comes in studio. And we're like, sorry, Soleil, we loved you in Punky Brewster, but, if you can't do Zoom, then sorry about that.
And yeah.
And Sirach's like, I'm just going to change the subject here.
That's all on Ryan on that one.
Cherry! Anyway,
but you seem very even keel, and even in your personality, Daren, you're not like I can't see you being like an angry person and yelling and cursing. You seem like a really mellow, even keel.
I try to be. I mean, I have strong opinions on things, but I'm certainly open to talking about them. I think that's the difference.
Well, then you don't fit into today's society. Sorry, Daren.
Totally. No, totally. I'm completely
Sorry about that.
Out of my element. Yeah.
What's this discussion stuff you're talking about? No.
Yeah. Well, that's great, man. I think it's pretty remarkable when somebody's also a fan and they're also working on the production or, in the mix. So you're kind of wearing two different hats.
And it's not an easy juggle sometimes, because usually in the professional situation, you got to hide that fandom, or else they're going to get scared, and maybe rightfully so. But it's a tough thing. But I like to think that I've been able to sort of handle them both as fairly as possible.
Absolutely. I mean, you can lose a job if you are, putting your fandom ahead of your professional business. Absolutely.
Yeah, a lot of times, especially these days, when everything you say is documented.
But I can also see it working in your favor too. I mean, especially when it comes to the knowledge.
Exactly.
Star Trek has so much specific knowledge that if you didn't watch it and you don't know about it, then it will be way over your head. And I think that having the fan aspect allows you to say, oh yeah, you mean from, okay, yeah, sure, I remember that. That was original series.
You can put them take them under your wing and be like, I've been a fan longer than you. Let me show you what you're looking for here.
Yeah, actually, the Romulans would have used one of these devices.
I just have a comment about this script. You say that the Romulans are doing this.
Yeah, they would never say that. They would not.
Yeah, but if you go back to episode 3,
I think you'll find the answer to your problem there. Yeah.
And they're like, is the answer just go ahead and do that thing we asked, please?
Yeah.
Anyway, we do have to run. Daren, it's easy to see why you have a podcast and a successful one is because you're a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah.
You're a lot of fun to listen to, honestly. Like I felt like it was kind of like a Trek radio. I was like going, it felt like a ride through the history of Star Trek. You know what I mean? It was kind of nice.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly hope that those who listen to it enjoy it, and that those who might enjoy it listen, because it's I think we have something for every sort of facet of fandom, hopefully, or at least something that we can convey our enjoyment from how we grew up through Star Trek into the modern era.
Yeah.
Great. So we'll leave it with that. Check out Inglorious Treksperts anywhere you check out things, right? It's all
anywhere
over
you
social
find
media.
podcasts.
Yeah.
And if you want, take a listen to the 4:30 movie as well, because there's some fun things on there too.
Awesome. Great. Mr. Daren DOCHTERMAN, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you.
And for those of you at home, stick around for the next video or event or party, whatever we got on Virtual TrekCon. Thanks very much.